Welcome to the Sunflower Conversations with me, Chantal. Today we're going to be discussing fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD. Joining me today is Tristan. How are you, Tristan?
Hi, I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Tristan established FASD Ireland, a not-for-profit that aims to raise awareness and provide support to families living with FASD in Ireland. Tristan is also the regional director for the Sunflower in Ireland. We also have with us Janet Griffin. How are you, Janet?
I'm very well, thank you. I think it's the rest of the world that clearly has issues, not me.
So Janet is mum to Rossi. Rossi was born with FASD and joins us today to share their experiences as a family. Tristan, could you tell us what is FASD and how might it affect someone?
Well, simply put, FASD is an abbreviation of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. We have an S on the end simply because it's an umbrella term that is used to describe a number of conditions that can be caused by drinking alcohol during pregnancy or when indeed planning to get pregnant. There are a number of comorbid conditions that affect people with FASD. And when I say that a number, I mean there are currently 428 conditions that can be associated with the condition of FASD. So I'm not going to list them for you now, but the most common one would be ADHD, of which 70% of people diagnosed with FASD will have to some degree. It does affect all sorts of attributes of human functionality. And so, you know, what I tend to say to people is, if you have a concern about your child, and you recognise that you may have been drinking through pregnancy, then look up FASD and see how many boxes you can tick before going to seek advice. Just imagine for a second a teacher in a class of 30 children walking in and asking the children to please sit down and be quiet. And it takes your child 22 seconds to process that. And the message may not even get through to where it needs to go. And your child is still standing there laughing, joking, or trying to settle. And that then causes significant problems with the education system. But here in Ireland, we have a pretty dire situation at the moment where the National Council for Special Education, the NCSE as it's known, doesn't recognise FASD as a disability. So although we have a significant number of children in every cohort, so 600 babies a year born in Ireland with FASD, the NCSE refuses to recognise that FASD exists.
That's really very shocking to hear that that's not recognised, this condition in Ireland. I am assuming that FASD Ireland is campaigning hard, strong and fast to get that changed.
Yes, our reason of existence is simply that we want the government to acknowledge FASD. We want to raise awareness. We want support for the families, children, young people, adults with FASD. So we like to think we have a three-pronged approach. It's about prevention, it's about supporting, and it's about raising awareness.
So Jan, I bring you in here? How old is Rossi? Rossi is your son, and when did you discover that he has FASD?
Yeah, Rossi is my birth son, which is a super important point to get across here, because there's a significant amount of children with FASD will be in the adoptive area or the children in care. There's a lot more of me's out there than is spoken about, and that's where I'm trying to get it out there, that you don't get shot. I found out when I was actually around about 4 months that I was actually pregnant. I was a bit poorly, I had to go into hospital. Not for a second did I think that I was actually be pregnant, but it was the last thing on my mind. And so it went on, and Rossi was then born. He was very tiny, 5 weeks early, and but nothing was really picked up that anything was wrong with him. And I then started the very long journey of 12 years collecting labels, and autism one, ADHD another, febrile convulsions, behavioural issues, lots and lots of different things, all of which didn't fit Rossi. None of them fitted Rossi at all. And it wasn't until he was 11 years old that I was still seeking to find out what the missing part of the jigsaw was. And I read about a young lad on the Surrey and Borders NHS, which is a chap called Raja Mukherjee. He's a consultant chap over here that was one of the only people that could diagnose FASD. And I read a story about this young man called Andrew. And it really wasn't about Andrew, it was about Rossi.
That must have been a very hard thing to process, particularly when you said that your doctor pretty much prescribed you brandy to calm your nerves and help you get to sleep.
Yeah, but yeah, he knew I was a builder. It just was not a thing. And there's so many women out there that have got a child with ADHD or autism and they're not quite fitting the bill. They're being given an Ehcp or whatever they might be in Ireland, but it's not quite working.
Would you mind, just for our audience, explaining what an Ehcp is, please?
Oh, sorry, yeah, it's and in the UK, I'm not sure about Ireland, it's called an educational healthcare plan. In the olden days, it was a statement of needs.
And would you say it's from that plan that helped you to recognise that these wasn't the correct diagnosis, it wasn't the full picture, because you weren't able to tick off all of those action points on there?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Tristan will tell you as well with his children that there's huge differences. There's a lot of similarities because it is overlapping. It is an umbrella. So Rossi does have autism. He does have ADHD, but he also has FASD, which is brain damage, organic brain damage, which means that the neural pathways, the grey matter in his brain didn't migrate across. So therefore those pathways weren't built. He's got nodules in his brain. So he has a huge issue with memory. You can teach him one thing one day, he will have it pinned down, but tomorrow it's gone.
As a parent, Jan, what have your biggest challenges been?
I think with Rossi, it was a case of he was different. So he wouldn't engage very well. He would be very, he would perseverate on things, that he would just get fixed on things. Very autistic traits, really. But the one that really stood out was the one where he didn't learn via consequences. He didn't learn that he put his hand on there, it was hot, he won't do that again. He would do it again and again and again. The only way I could get him to learn was by doing everything musically, kinesthetically. I realised early on that it was absolutely pointless trying to cut off those corners of Rossi, because he was who he was.
How was Rossi's FASD incorporated within the family setting when the older two children don't have that health condition?
They used to think that I kind of spoiled him a bit, because I would always just give him, it was natural for me to go, okay, he hasn't got that, so I need to find a different way to get him to get that. And so I would spend a lot more time, still not knowing it was FASD. I'd accepted all the other labels gratefully, because it did open the doors.
Socially, now he's older, how does he interact with the world? Does he have friends? You mentioned he's writing a book with a friend. How is his social life?
He does really want to socialise, but he does do massive faux pas all the time. He's a makeup artist, qualified makeup artist. He is amazing. He really is amazing at that. He's a fantastic singer. He's brilliant at acting. He's got this whole side of him which has driven him forwards, and he said that it's the creative side of him that has helped him get through.
Are there any specific treatments for a child or adult with FASD, medication? Tristan, is there anything that you have come across that helps?
There's no golden bullet as such. You know, it's very much based around individual need and any of the comorbidities that are recognised with the condition of FASD. It's important to consider a more holistic approach. So one where we put strategies in place to support, where the adults and peer group around the child are aware of the circumstances, the behaviours, the situations, and that they know how to read the room rather than taking exception to it. The good thing is at the moment, there's so much research going on around the world that whilst there is no cure for FASD, because it is absolutely, you know, lifelong, it's about how the brain was formed. We haven't yet learned to grow new brains in test tubes. So what we have to do is we have to live with what nature provides, and we have to build strategies to help us as a family cope with that. If people think that their child may have FASD, the first thing to do is to talk to the SENCO at school, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator. It's a SENDCO in the UK, so they've added in the word disability, so SENDCO, because they will have lots of ideas around support and the strategies for the child if FASD is a potential flag, but also the route to diagnosis. Again, we don't have one in Ireland per se, but you know, we're catching up with the UK. The route to diagnosis is usually from the SENDCO to a referral to the community paediatrician, to a referral to CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service, and from there it kind of goes into the specialist arena of FASD. Now, the UK, up until a couple of weeks ago, had 2 clinics, one in Suffolk, one in Surrey. The Suffolk clinic sadly is closing or has closed. The single biggest issue for us right now is to get FASD recognised as a disability in itself.
It's getting the information out there to get people to understand the devastating effect that the ethanol within the alcohol can cause, and to stop us having to have this elongated fight. The people that adopt children, foster children, they do it out of absolute love, and the last thing they expect, not that they mind, is to have a child with FASD, or to have a child with FASD that they don't know has got FASD.
I agree. I mean, when we adopted our youngest 8 years ago now, the local authority absolutely hid the fact that FASD was a possibility, and he came with 51 other diagnoses. And we ticked off, you know, every single one of those. I think we were left with ADHD, and I just looked at it and went, no. I can see ADHD, I can see bits of it, but no, there's something more to this. You have to learn to be a paediatrician, a counsellor, a therapist, a specialist, an educator. You have to learn to be able to walk into a school and not be treated as a neurotic parent, which happens. You know, in the end, it got to September last year for me, and I said, I'm doing this every day, so let's call ourselves something, and let's do it properly. And so we set ourselves up, and overwhelming support in the last 6 months from all sectors of society in Ireland. You know, I have letters from teachers, I have letters from people who have FASD who are in their 40s and just need help but don't know where to get that help.
Do you see individuals with FASD living independent lives, or are they still generally supported by family or a carer or something like that?
I think up to now, it's fair to say that 99.9% of people with FASD remain at home with a parent or carer. And that's simply because, and I can only talk about Ireland now really, because that's my experience. And I think that's simply because there has been none to little recognition.
It's a bit like autism was 15, 20 years ago. Suddenly everybody's had the memo. So everybody's fully aware of what autism is and how to deal with it, not. And that is now FASD.
It doesn't help anyone when the social stigma drives the parent to request the wrong diagnosis. And that's the battle we have here currently, is that the difficult conversations are not being had by schools, by healthcare workers, paediatricians, specialist doctors, CAMS, the National Educational Psychologist Service. They're not having these conversations with parents because they're difficult conversations.
And Tristan, where can people affected by FASD, where can they head to learn more to support themselves or their family member?
Well, across the two countries of Ireland and the UK, we have our own website, which is fasdireland.ie. And in the UK, you have nationalfasd.org.uk. Both of those sites have absolutely loads of information about FASD, answering questions for people who think, does my child have FASD, right through to, what help can I get? So I would always encourage people to look at those websites. If you're in Scotland, of course, you've got the National FASD Hub, which is a remarkable asset. So if you're based up in Scotland, please use that, because it's just, one of the best things in the UK right now for people living with FASD.
I want to thank you both for spending an hour with me today to talk to me about FASD, to really understand what it is and how it can impact a person, and what things need to be done. But I think for me, that's come the most important message that I've pulled out of what you both have to say is that education around this, and stigma. Guys, forget the stigma.